I want to talk about the end of The Boys, and since I don't really have anybody else to talk to about it, I'm going to talk to you about it. So The Boys was on Amazon, and it was one of the greatest shows ever for the first few seasons, and then it fell off. Now, the last season didn't fall off as bad as the last season of Game of Thrones, even though if you go on and watch any internets and YouTubes and that kind of stuff, you'll see nerds yelling and screaming about that, but it wasn't that bad. But the finale and the final season was a disappointment. The finale especially. They kind of ruined it. Because the thing that was great about The Boys, especially for someone that didn't read the comics like me, I had no idea what The Boys was until I started watching the TV show. So perhaps that doesn't make me some hardcore fan of The Boys, which I readily admit, but as far as just someone that watched the TV show, the ending was so far off anything that I'd hoped for. Because The Boys had balls, bro. The Boys was offensive and weird and surprising and grotesque, and the carnage and the death and the sex and everything that was going on was just unbelievably awesome. The series basically opens with Huey's girlfriend standing in the street getting blown up by A-Train, which you didn't see coming ahead. Right there, I was hooked. I'm like, what the hell is this show? This is insane. And then the orgies and the instant deaths and Homelander when he clapped that guy's ears, and I mean, the list goes on and on. Those first few seasons are insane. Now this last season didn't make any sense, really, and was kind of unnecessary, and the finale itself just completely switched tones for some reason. Instead of The Boys, it was like the end of Friends. It was like really, when I was watching it, it reminded me of the end of The Breakfast Club. Everybody goes their own way and everybody hugs each other. Now let's get into all the particulars and all the spoilers and everything, and let me tell you the ending that I wish happened, that I kind of thought about a little bit, and which would have been awesome, I think. So the way The Boys ended, if you didn't know, is that they killed Homelander, Huey kills Butcher, Terror the dog dies for some reason, which was the most offensive part of the last episode, to be honest. That's the part, that part pissed me off more than anything. Frenchie died the episode before. The Deep gets killed. And then Huey and Starlighter live happily ever after. Oh, horrible. And Kimiko goes to France by herself and looks like Alfred at the end of The Dark Knight Returns, sitting there. Just, oh, look, everything worked out for me. Oh, what was that? The most badass, grotesque, surprisingly awesome series of all time ends with the happiest ending I've ever seen? Oh. Was the point of that to just piss people off? This is what should have happened. One of the many things the last season that happened, there was a bunch of stuff that happened that didn't mean anything. And that's where you can draw the parallels between Game of Thrones and the ending of The Boys, is that there was all these threads and cool stuff that happened that didn't have anything to do with anything and didn't have any impact on the story. Namely, Homelander, taking V1, supposedly ascends to being a god and is immortal, but apparently had no effect on his powers whatsoever, because in that final scene where they're fighting Homelander, it's Homelander's son and Butcher, and they're beating Homelander up, and there's just two of them, and he's just flying around using the same powers that he was using before, and Butcher was taking on Homelander one-on-one. I thought Homelander had ascended to V1 God Immortal status, why did he just not tear through Butcher in 2 seconds? The other thing that bothered me about it is, so now that he's Super Homelander, and we haven't seen him use any of his upgraded powers, I guess, that he doesn't have any upgraded powers, that he's just the same old Homelander. So what was everybody so afraid of with him getting the V1 if he was just the same level of power as he was before? Because the whole crux of the thing was, we can't let Homelander get the V1 because then he's going to destroy the whole world. Is he? Because there's about 15,000 superheroes in The Boys. Doesn't Vought have all sorts of different levels? Local soups, the 7 national soups. There's a ton, right? So if Homelander can be restrained by Butcher and his son, you're telling me 50 soups couldn't take out Homelander in a straight up fight? Because that's what it made it seem like they couldn't restrain Homelander. If Butcher and his son can do that, 15 other soups could probably do it. I didn't understand that. It didn't make any sense. So there was no point of the V1 other than he lives forever. It didn't have the impact that they thought, or it just didn't have any impact on anything, I guess. And they didn't show it having any impact on anything. So that's one of the things I didn't really like. One of the other things I didn't really like about this ending that they did was Homelander's big comeuppance, where he has his breakdown and everybody's watching him, and Butcher, they're taking his powers away, so Butcher's about to kill him, and he's begging and he's pleading, and he's, I'll suck your dick, you can take a shit on me, and it's really him begging for his life, and Homelander looks like a bitch and all that kind of stuff. Now, what we were supposed to feel is good. The worst character, the biggest baddie, is finally getting it. Yeah, let's twist the knife into this guy because he's the biggest evil, and this is so great. They wanted it to be like when Joffrey died. That was the hope. That was the idea. Because they wanted to be uplifted to that level of greatest villain deaths of all time, and the #1 most hated character of all time was Joffrey. And so we were supposed to hate Homelander at that level. Here's the problem. This past season was so irritating that I came to dislike the heroes more than I disliked Homelander. Meaning, I didn't buy for a second Starlander and Huey's relationship. They were just annoying. The no chemistry, completely mismatched. Frenchie and Kimiko, and there was annoying. Butcher, that guy's always good, so that was Carl Urban, and I think that he was fine. Mother's Milk really had nothing to do throughout the entire season. Can't tell you one good thing that guy did. So I was either didn't care about the characters or basically disliked them. And the most likable character throughout the entire season was Homelander, because he was still a great Homelander. Even though they literally gave him nothing to work with, it didn't matter. That Anthony Starr guy was still great. So I was more entertained by the Homelander that I was supposed to hate. So when they killed him, I wasn't like, yeah. I was like, well, okay. Because the way they built up to Homelander getting his comeuppance is that him ascending to God was supposed to be offensive. But the problem with that is most of the people that watch The Boys and understand it for what it is aren't going to be offended by Homelander pretending that he's God, because it's not like it's a bunch of Jesus-fearing people watching The Boys going, oh, I'm offended by this blasphemy. For the most part, people watching that, that's one of the least offensive storylines and things to happen on The Boys. Nobody is going to cry and bemoan and go, oh, I'm super offended by Homelander pretending that he's God. It was just a goofy, weird thing in my estimation that didn't make me dislike Homelander at all, to be honest, because it was just so corny. So I think that both of those things missed the mark. And then the whole virus thing meant absolutely nothing. Apparently, the end, he puts it in the sprinkler system. Butcher puts it in the sprinkler system, and then he doesn't deploy it. So they went through all this stuff to not use it on Homelander, to not use it on any of the other soups, to not use it on anything. So essentially, it got dumped into the the Vought building's sprinkler system, and that was the end of that. What a stupid waste of time. They had these things set up that, okay, I'm kind of following this. I can kind of hopefully, all right, maybe they'll do something cool with this, and then did nothing cool with it whatsoever. So what would I had liked to see? All right, so I basically told you everything that I didn't like about it. On the way home, because I'm driving into work, on the way home, I'm going to lay out what I would have liked to see happen on the end of The Boys. All right, so that'll be on the way home.